Right, recording's in progress. So just to introduce again, this is the last session of the funding fair where we're focusing on funding from groundwork, which includes Tesco Bags of Help. And also we're going to hear about SEMLEP funding. So let me just return to my share. So we began by just talking about the Boost Drinks Fund, a fund that's providing community funding of up to £10,000. And you'll find all the information about that. It's very general in its sense of they want to have an impact on legacy provision, focus on diversity and impact and legacy. So that link will be circulated and you can find out more about that fund. It's administered by Groundwork UK. And wasn't in the headline of this funding initiative, but I just thought I'd tell you about it as I had heard. And this new fund that I just heard about yesterday, a ridiculous turnaround on this, the one-stop shop initiative. Now, one-stop shops are Tesco franchises that are around our county. You may well know one in your locality. And they're going to provide two bursaries to support two young people, not only with funding for through their period of study, but two internships over the holiday period and business mentoring. So these are young people who might be interested in getting involved in retail. They want them to be studying online technology, business development, business growth. So that again will be in the links the slides will come around and you'll see this link. And I've asked the infrastructure organisations around the county to also share this. Ridiculous, the closing date, it says there 30th of June, it's actually this Sunday. So if you know any young people that have got a place for a course in September this year, encourage them to have a look at this. Another fund that Groundwork administer is the Comic Relief Community Grant. And at the moment, we've got 7 projects in Northamptonshire that have got funding here. It gives up to £4,000 per project, plus a capacity building grant as well that can be additional to support a group. This programme is closed at the moment, but it will reopen, and when it does, we'll be circulating that information around the various infrastructure newsletters that many of you are signed up to. If you're not signed up to your local infrastructure group, then you'll have a volunteer bureau in your area. I'm in Kettering Voluntary Network, and we all do newsletters with funding advice, etc. I just wanted to remind you about this so you can keep it on your radar. Again, if you look at, go and Google Groundwork community funds, then it will come up on the list. But the main fund that I wanted to talk to you about was Tesco Community Grants. Now, over the years, these originated and were known as Tesco Bags of Help. And this is where you got a blue token in store and deposited it in a Perspex container as you left the store and voted for one of 3 projects. The good news about this programme was that if you get into the voting, you will receive some funding. When this fund was initiated many years ago, there was much more money in the pot, and that was mainly because we were all spending far more money at the supermarkets, Tesco's and others, in paying for plastic bags. And Tesco's put all of this money into this fund pot. And so when it originated, the 3 awards were 15,000, 10,000 and 8,000. It was quite a substantial fund. But unfortunately, or good news, we're not buying so many plastic bags these days, and so the fund is reducing. But in May of this year, this was relaunched as Tesco Community Grants. And through the COVID period, of course, there couldn't be any voting in store. And so the COVID COVID-19 support fund that I know many of you have benefited from actually was just administered centrally without voting by customers. So I was saying that this came from the money from plastic bags, because it was originally the 5p for a carrier bag, now 10p for bags at Tesco's, and as that sum of money has reduced in the general pot, what was a 2-monthly turnaround for those 3 projects in a store, it's now quarterly. And the sum of money that's available is reduced. However, if you come first in the voting in store, £1,500 is yours. If you come second, 1,000, and third place is 500. The good news about this programme is that the breadth of what will be covered is huge. And basically, it's any project that will deliver community benefit. And I know that's what you will do. So whereas other schemes will be much more focused, then that's the general thing for Tesco's. So in our area, what happens with the voting and how groups are distributed around the voting arena is that each Tesco store region has 3 applications that go in to vote in that store. And so for our area, these are the major Tesco stores. So we've major Tesco stores in Brackley, Corby. Corby's a strange geography because it sort of reflects the parliamentary constituency more and stretches across the north of the area, but also into Leicestershire. So it includes Market Harborough and stretches over to Oundle. Daventry is another area, then Kettering, Northampton, which is divided into 2 areas, sub-areas. So Mereway and Western Fable are 2 subsections, each having 3 different applications going in to vote in Northampton, Towcester and Wellingborough. And Wellingborough stretches to include Rushden, Raunds and Earthlingborough as well. So as I was saying, the good news about this programme is that the broad coverage is huge. So it's very much anything that will includes purchasing items and providing services. So you could be running sessions. Interestingly, here as well, it will include celebration. I know that organisations who have got, the 25th anniversary of their organisation, they've had funding in the past to support their groups. As I said, their organisational anniversary, a community party, Christmas parties. So you describe it, and it's very likely to be accepted. The other positive element of this programme is that practically anybody who is providing, whose organisation is not for profit and is for community benefit can apply. In essence, all you need to do is to have a bank account that can receive the money and have good governance arrangements. That's partly around your organisational bank account, which needs to be in the name of your organisation. Money can't go to individuals. And you need to have a governance document that you can upload in the online application process, whether that's a constitution or articles of memorandum, anything that describes how you are. And basically, you can see there the list of organisations is huge. And it includes, schools and health bodies, parish and town councils. Unitary councils are excluded from this. But in the old days, which is a few months ago, the boroughs and districts could apply. But of course, they don't exist now. But of course, we now have the new developing town councils, as well as the tradition of parish councils that we've always had. Social housing providers as well, community interest companies, and any community socially minded group with supporting governance and banking documents and process. So how do you apply? You apply online. There's the link. So you just need to Google Tesco Community Grants, and you'll find the link which will take you through to the groundwork website, where it'll list all the funding opportunities that are there. All of them have an eligibility quiz, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a very simple, straightforward form that basically states that you are an organisation. You answer to say that, yes, we've got a constitutional governance documents, etc. And they'll then send you the link to the application form. I've got a comment there. Whilst in draft, you can share the application form. So it has a link, a button that says email. And if it's helpful to you, because you don't need to do this at all, you can just crack on and get on with it and submit, is that if you'd like some support with the application, then you can email me, and I'm here to support all local groups in making application to these funds. So that's my role onwards in this. There's also a wide range of FAQs, frequently asked questions online, that help you in the challenges of making an application. So what makes a good application? Well, and I should have put that on here. My headline on this is less is more. You'll find that there are limits in the number of words that they want submitted within the boxes on the application form. The most important of these is a box which has 140 characters, which includes the spaces between the words. And that is the catch line that will go into the voting box. So below the name of your project or organisation, you'll get up to 140 characters to market your project and differentiate it from its neighbouring projects in the 3 boxes that are in the store for voting. You want people to drop their blue token into your box rather than your neighbours. So you get 140 characters to say what you're doing. And then you get 300 words to describe it in more detail. That's just for the funding officer to understand what your project is, and of course your budget. I always say, have a budget to cover or exceed the available fund. I always have a note of sadness where I see somebody come first in the voting and they've only asked for £700 for a project and they could have had 1,500. Now, if you only need £700, then don't stress about my comments. But many projects and organisations can benefit from the money, and I'm here and happy to help people to work out how to spend the money. So if that's a challenge, drop me a note. And of course, be passionate and enthusiastic about what you're doing. It'll come across. So look on the Groundwork website. There's also project fundraising tips, information there. And we'll come to questions in a minute, but I'm the local support person for you. So as well as working for running the voluntary network support across Kettering, I'm also the voluntary sector development manager for Groundwork, and I'm here to support. So that's me, and that's the Tesco's programme. We'll come on to questions in a minute, but Becky, do you want to tell everybody about SEMLEP?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yes, so some of you may have heard of SEMLEP Community Grants Programme. It's been running for a little while now. In fact, we're just on round 6. There were originally only supposed to be 3 rounds, but they were lucky enough to get a top up of money and an extension of time. So we're just launching round 6 this week, well, last week now. So this is essentially ultimately European money. It's ESF funded, that's European Social Fund. And the ESFA, sorry for all the acronyms, Education Skills Funding Agency, were successful in winning the contract for community grants, and they then subcontracted that to different organisations in different areas, and SEMLEP has ours. So that's South East Midlands Local Enterprise Partnership. So they have currently 1.27 million left in their pot, and they need to award that by March 2023. So there's still plenty of money in the pot, and they do actively really want to spend it. So any applications from eligible organisations with eligible projects will be absolutely more than welcome. The one thing I have to say is about the geography, which I said yesterday when I did the session, I always feel terribly guilty about saying when I'm talking to a room full of Northamptonshire people, because the original call for this money was based back in 2013, I think, although the programme's not been running that long, but originally it was going on the SEMLEP geography as it was then, which means that places like Cherwell and Aylesbury Vale are included, but unfortunately Wellingborough and East Northants are not included. Obviously I know they don't technically exist anymore anyway, but what was Wellingborough and East Northants, if you're only delivering work in those areas, unfortunately you won't be eligible for the community grants programme, and it is just a quirk of the geography at the time these things were designed, unfortunately. The rest of Northamptonshire is eligible. So grants are for projects that cost between £10,000 and £20,000. Those are the amounts that you can apply for, and the overriding sort of ethos is to bring unemployed and economically inactive people closer to the job market. So the grants programme wants to receive applications from organisations that can create bespoke ways to engage with people, particularly from the hardest to reach communities, people further away from the job market, and bring them closer through developing confidence, self-esteem, enhancing employability skills, transferable life skills, all of those. So examples of projects could include those that provide training, advice or counselling to support with the job search, assist with financial numeracy and literacy, develop digital skills. There is also the proviso, obviously, given the times that we are still living in, that you do need to be able to demonstrate that if necessary, your project could be delivered under any restrictions that are in place due to COVID, so that you could move to online delivery if needs be, or you could deliver face-to-face with any social distancing rules and regulations that are that might be in place during the course of your project. Projects are expected to last for between 6 and 12 months. And for this round, the likely starting date for any of your activity would be September, beginning of September, by the time all the processes have gone through and you've got contracts signed and so on. So please bear that in mind when you're planning work and activities within the project. There are a number of target groups. Their sort of top 2 priority groups at the moment are the over 50s, particularly those who have been recently made redundant, and people with disabilities, health conditions and neurodivergent traits. There are other priority groups that speak to their sort of general SEMLEP priorities, and you will find a list of those in the guidance and on their websites. It includes things like people from BAME communities, ex-offenders and so on. But those top 2 that I mentioned first, over 50s and people with disabilities and health conditions, will be prioritised if you work with those target groups. It's not to say if you work with other groups, don't bother applying, because as I say, there's quite a lot of money around and they do want to spend it all. But if there were any sort of conflicts, then they would prioritise people working in those 2 areas. There are specific deliverables and outcomes that you will need to commit to. So when anyone starts, you have to complete a learner assessment and plan for them. But more importantly, or as importantly, you do have to commit to getting certain proportions of your participants into paid employment and into education or training. So those are set at 17% into paid employment and 14% into education or training. It's not an either or. You can't decide that you want to do all 31% into employment or education and training. It has to be those percentages, both of those, as a minimum. They're not asking you to work with hundreds of participants because it's a relatively small amount of money for what they expect to be quite intensive work. So you're only probably
some coriander on the top.
15 to 25 participants in total. And so the numbers that actually are expected to achieve those outcomes are not huge, but they are non-negotiable. Okay, and it's worth noting that progression into volunteering isn't itself an output under this community grants project. I know it has been for community grants projects sometimes in the past, and that sometimes catches people out, but it's not for this programme. It can be a part of the activity, and certainly can be a really good something that you offer to help people on their way, but it's not an output in itself. If you just go on mute, that would be really helpful. Thank you. To be eligible for the community grants, as I say, you do need to work in the geography that we've talked about, and your organisation does need to have less than £300,000 annual income and have fewer than 50 full-time equivalent paid employees. And you also need to bear in mind that you need to be able to demonstrate that you are completely autonomous from any organisation that has in excess of either of those two things. So if you're part of a national organisation or an umbrella organisation, you do have to show that your organisation works completely independently and has completely independent finances, and you do have to submit financial documents and things that will show that. So if you have any doubts about that, please ask the question sooner rather than later before you spend too much time on your application. You have to have be a constituted organisation. You have to have a constitution of some description to show how your organisation is managed and what it does. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to, I think in some of the guidance and on the application form, it is called a constitution, but it doesn't actually have to be called that. If you have another name for it, if you have mem and arts, or you have any other kind of governing document, as long as it shows that you're legally constituted and that you do have a legal structure that shows that you are a VCSE organisation. So the definition of that is quite broad. You don't have to be a registered charity, you could be a CIC, you could be other types of structure, but you can't be a sole trader, you can't be a private company, you can't be a company limited by shares. I think the definition that they use broadly reflects a lot of other funders, including the lottery, and it is made quite clear again in their guidance. But if you have any doubts as to whether or not you would be eligible, then again, I would ask you to ask the question sooner rather than later, so you know whether it's worth your time proceeding with your application or not. That's nearly it. I'm conscious I've just talked at you for a little while, but the only other things that I would just like to make clear is that because it's European money, it's not a grant that is just given to you upfront. It does work on a reimbursing expenditure claim process. So you will get 25% of the money that you ask for upfront to start you off and make sure that you can get off to a good start with your project. But that is then done on a reimbursed claim basis. So with your second quarter of payment, you have to show that you've expended that before you can claim for it. You also have to show that you've expended the bit that you were given up front. So the reason I sort of raise that now is it is important that you feel that as an organisation you have the cash flow to be able to cope with that. So you will be paying some invoices or paying some staff or whatever up front before you get the money back. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you are in a financial position that allows you to do that. And again, because it's European money, there is a reasonable amount of paperwork expected. You will be provided with templates for all of that, so you won't be sort of, you know, at a loss as to what you need to provide. That will all be sort of clearly explained to you. But please, please, please make sure that you take it into account when you're planning your work, because you will need to allow time for that. You'll need to allow staff capacity for that as well. So again, just don't want organisations to get caught out without having sufficient resources to really manage the project on the way through. I think that's about it. What else? Oh, the current round closes on Wednesday, the 30th of June at midday. So please bear that in mind. And in order to apply, the first thing that you need to do is to go onto the SEMLEP website, find their community grant section, and fill in, there's a short expression of interest form on there. So you need to pop on there, fill in the expression of interest. You'll then get an email response that gives you all the guidance that you need, a Word version of the application form for you to work up a draft on, and you'll be given my contact details so that you can come to me for any support or feedback on your application before you submit. There's also lists of things like supporting documents that you need to submit and so on as well. And yeah, I think that's really it. I can see that a few questions have come through. I'll let Sean
okay, thank you, Becky. And before we go to the questions, which I see you've started to populate on the chat form, which is great. One thing I forgot to mention about the Tesco programme is that if your organisation works and covers different store areas, you can put up to 6 applications into the system. You just have to tailor each application, nuance it as to how you're delivering in Wellingborough or how you're delivering in Brackley. So you can have multiple applications that go in the system. You can then go back and apply again, but you can't apply whilst you have an application outstanding against any store area. Once you've completed funding, the funding that you've received, then you fill in a completion form, which will be available to you, and then you can apply again. So I'm just going over to the chat column here and to answer your question. So will the presentations be available post-call? Yes, this and all the presentations and recordings of these sessions will also be made available on the Northamptonshire Council website, but every attendee will get sent that information. Then there was a question about what store radius, please. So when you go into the application process, there'll be a store locator button that you'll put in your postcode, and it will tell you which is your closest store. Of course, if you're then applying for multiple stores, then you can go in and put in a different place, and you'll get the detail for that other store for subsequent applications. So if that question, which I think is from Linda, was about the Tesco Bags of Help programme, then that's the answer to that. And if it's in relation to the bursary programme, you need to be close to one of those shops. But again, go into the process and there'll be the store locator. So if a group is a partnership, can funding go to a partner member? Who submitted that? Is that Linda as well?
Yeah, that's me as well. I'm also part of Stoke Brewing Canal Partnership, which is a partnership of stakeholders. So right. we don't have a bank account as a partnership, but most of our partner members do. Would we still be able to apply for Tesco funding?
One of you would have to take the lead and be the named partner, because we'd need to see the governance documents and also to see the bank account, organisational bank accounts. Okay, then how you then spent that money between you, you've still got the accountable body organisation, okay, the one that you decide takes the lead. Thank you. Okay, and then a question about, you've already applied, it's from Bill at Midland Langer Association. When will you hear? The whole programme is administered by Groundwork UK, and they send out notifications. So the next round of voting is July, August, September, and they're notifying people now. If you're not successful, because some areas more people apply than there are the 3 places, your application is held till the next round that comes through. So it's a rolling programme. So you will be notified if you're successful. but also I can have a conversation with you away from here and dig into the data and discover the detail for you. So Daniel's asked, can I apply for a grant where the budget exceeds £1,500? And yes, you can, Daniel. It's quite okay for this to be a contributory factor. What you need to bear in mind, though, is that you'll have 12 months within which to spend the money. So you'll need to do that. And so if you're developing a play area, it could be, or refurbishing play equipment, it could be that you purchase, some of that equipment or a piece of that equipment within the year to enable you to do that. And then you can then install it as the project develops on. I hope that's a helpful answer. And you've already raised some money. It's quite okay. And you'll see within the application process, it asks you about that, whether you've got other contribution going to the project. And this one, I think, Becky, is for you. It's really asking about why East Northants isn't in, and I think it's about your South East Midlands regional boundary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and unfortunately, it is just down to a quirk of in the geography at the time and historical geography at that. Because if some people might know that back in the day, South East Midlands didn't cover all of Northamptonshire, and there was a Northamptonshire LEP that did cover all of Northamptonshire, so they sort of overlapped. Which was, if anything, even more confusing. And they have since merged. Northamptonshire LEP doesn't exist anymore, so SEMLEP took on East Northants and Wellingborough, which it hadn't covered before, so that it covered the whole of Northamptonshire. However, as I say, unfortunately, at the time, because these programmes take so long in development and contracting and all of that, when the initial calls for the contract originally came out, it was when SEMLEP didn't cover those regions, and unfortunately they have tried talking to ESF and the ESFA as to see whether there's any movement on that at all, but unfortunately, because it's come down from European money, they're very strict that it has to be the geography as was around at that time. So I'm very, very sorry, but unfortunately. So
Becky, it's true. So it includes Bedford and Milton Keynes.
Bedfordshire and Milton Keynes are all covered in SEMLEP because they always have been. So yeah, I'm sorry. It's a
strange area, folks.
It is, and obviously going forward, if anything else comes through, then it would be going on the new geography. But there's nothing we can do about this one, I'm afraid.
Well, presumably, Becky, European funding will fade.
Yeah, but
it is fading.
Yes, but it will be replaced by, well, who knows what at the moment. It's a watch this space.
Absolutely.
It seems a bit odd, though. It does sound a bit odd, though. Thanks, Becky. But it does sound a bit odd that you just said Bedfordshire and Buckinghamshire included, as if this area of North East Hants, the Russian area, has been left blank. It seems rather odd. Unless, is there a similar LEP that would cover, or have we just been left out of the frame completely?
Yeah, on this occasion, I'm afraid that you are. I don't have anything more positive to say, I'm afraid. It is just, it's the quirk of the contracts that came out at that time. Yeah, sorry, I have nothing more helpful to say, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, folks, there's nothing else in the chat. We are a very large group, which is wonderful, but it doesn't really encourage us to go into open conversation because there'll be too many voices over each other. And I don't have a screen where I can see everybody in one go, so I'd be likely to miss people who might be waving at me. So we do need to keep questions to the chat facility. But I hope that this session has been helpful to you. Becky and I would both be delighted for applications to come in. My programmes through the Groundwork Funding Network continue onwards. And as mentioned, with that boost fund and with this strange student bursary, things come in. Oh, excuse me, people are trying to get in touch with me. There's different funds that come by, and we do circulate that information around our various email updates that I'm sure many of you are plugged into over the county. So, folks, I think it draws on me because I've got the last session here with Becky of the 3-day funding fair. So we draw things to a close. I thank you for attending with us on this session. I hope you attended other sessions and have got something from these 3 days. We certainly are very pleased by going virtual that we've been able to attract funders from around the country who wouldn't necessarily have travelled into Northamptonshire to come and join us. So we intend to continue in this format, which I hope you found accessible and reasonable in that sense. Do please complete the feedback form that will be coming round, and I hope to see many of you again at some stage in the future. So I'm going to close the session. Becky, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining, and keep well. Take care. Bye-bye.